good old fuses. But what's really cool, one of the old barns, and you might have them too, the old light switches are, was open wiring.
Knob and tube, that's still legal. You can still use it in wet locations. It's
Wow.
preferable.
It's got a little round like dial button, you turn it. It must just turn on, and it's a round,
Oh, yeah, that's where the old switches used to be.
they're still on the walls out there, it's pretty cool.
No, they say knob and tube is actually safer if it's done right.
Yeah,
You know,
but
most
for
of the time
wet
it's not done
locations.
right, that's the problem.
Well, they never burned to the ground, so that was 125 years ago, so.
A lot of houses did burn when they first put up.
Well, I'm sure they did, didn't know anything about it.
I always remember when REA came through,
Yeah,
and the Ruth Harts, they put the poles right through the hayfield. And the old lady was just
Alma?
furious.
oh yeah,
And they had, it was all done by hand back then. They had a crew that came by and dug the
the
holes
shortest distance
and
between
laid the
two
poles down, and then another crew would come by the next day and, put the poles up and string the wires and stuff. She went out and filled all the holes in.
I was gonna say, knowing her, yes. I was gonna say, yeah.
She filled all the holes in.
She was quite
Crew
vocal.
showed up,
Yeah.
put the poles in, and there wasn't any holes.
She showed them.
They had the other crew come back and they dug a hole, set the pole, dug a hole, set the pole.
Well, you gotta do what you gotta do.
And they refused to hook up for years.
I believe him.
And then they finally got
Ready?
power, not in the house, in the barn, so the chickens would have lice, so they'd lay more eggs.
You ready, Jennifer?
Yep.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. We'll skip the pledge of allegiance in a moment of silence, so we go to roll call.
Commissioner Ansari,
Here.
Commissioner Rushing,
Present.
Commissioner Bunnick,
Here.
Commissioner Wessel,
Here.
Commissioner Solis Little,
Yes.
Commissioner Rettenbach,
Here.
and Commissioner Launer.
President.
All present.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to add to the action items, number 4, a closed session about negotiations. Because this is a workshop, we can just add things on, but, and it says action items, but there really is nothing action that we're gonna take this time, other than maybe picking more dates. All right, so, if you know, so that'd be number 4, a closed session. And then, so at this time, then we have public comment, and the number is 231-256-8109. 231-256-8109. If there's anyone, has any public comment, please call in. All right, having no public comment, then we move to the items for today on the agenda. So first, we have our 2021 budget review.
I'll just give a quick update here. Want to, of course, thank Jen, Michelle, and John for their efforts. Putting a book together like this is a lot of work, especially when there's election training going on, especially when instead of having 3, 4 election training sessions, I think Michelle had, what, 17?
Yeah, I think she's more on to like 25 right now today.
Okay, because of the space requirements that have been going on, so it's a tremendous work. I know a lot of weekends have been spent working on this, so thank you, John, for your projections, and Jen and Michelle for your time commitment. As you probably have heard, at the state level, they're looking at a major deficit for 2021. How that would impact counties, I think we'll more in our next budget session. The state revenue sharing conference is August 11th, I believe, John, is that correct? It's that week, it's not next week, it's the week after that, and that's gonna be critical. When we, several administrators met with our state rep, Jack O'Malley, just to see what he can tell us about state budget, he had no idea. He says until that state revenue conference, and even in Lansing, they're not talking about 2021. They were trying to get through 2020, which they did with federal funding. But if you heard the news last night, they're looking at $1 billion deficit for 2021. But the state would have more revenue projection on that by the next meeting. So I think all this is a guesstimate today. We're not expecting you to spend a lot of time today looking through this. We're hoping to give you the book. John can give a general overview of the revenue, maybe Jen can give a general overview. And next time we'll meet, we'll have a specific list of what the specific new requests are for the budget. And by that time, I think we'll have a better idea of where we are with the state in terms of their resources also.
All right.
Before you get started, John, I would like to make a comment in regards to that. Thank you for the floor, Mr. Chairman. I think it's going to be important for this board and our staff to recognize that even though we set this budget this year, we need to be prepared to pivot when the circumstances change, or if they get better or if they get worse. So, and I'm sure that during this last year, that's exactly what has happened with our, especially in our clerk's department and our administrative department. I would like to commend them for staying abreast of the current situations and taking immediate action in certain areas to keep this board on track, number one, and to still provide the services to our constituents. So, number one, thank you. And number two, I think we need to be aware that pivoting may be essential going forward.
And just on that, well, thank you for those kind words, but just as that, we were actually one of the first counties to start the process. I was at a conference call last week. A lot of counties are actually waiting to see what happens at the state level. And it could be that their budget also has greater impact by federal and state dollars than ours is, but everyone's kind of just waiting. So yes, it could change depending on what the federal government does. As you know, they're debating another round of stimulus money. Will that include state resources? Maybe, maybe not. If it does, that changes what the state does, which could impact us. So it really does have an impact. So yes, what we say today may change next month and may be different in December, it could be different in February. So we will adopt a budget in October, knowing that that may have to be modified, which fortunately you have the right to do it at any time. So this is probably now our best guess estimate. That's all that is. I'm confident at the federal level, something will happen either this week or next week. Both sides say it's going to happen, it's just a matter of what. If it includes any state revenue sharing, that will have a tremendous impact. It may or may not. They may pass a partial budget at the federal level in terms of a relief act, and then keep working on some topics. The state of Michigan obviously has some tough choices to make, and that will carry down to us. So it is a work in progress.
The other thing I'd like to mention at this point too, I attended my airport board meeting yesterday, and it looks like there is going to be more funding for airports over time under the new HEALS Act. So I don't think that the airport operational,
They won't be coming to us for money.
exactly, they won't be coming to us for money, so that's a relief for us in that regard. So
The biggest concern the state has, even if they get federal funding for 2021, that's a one-year fix. What's the long-term structural fix? And then even at the federal level, kind of what Commissioner Buddick brought up, at some point, someone has to pay for all these dollars that are coming forward. Where is that? So there's short-term fix, but what are the long-term implications? You can't deficit spend constantly without having a long-term consequence of that. And so there's a lot of unresolved issues that are beyond anything that we can do in this room. So all we can do is just be proactive. And I think you'll see our staff has been very conservative. They all realize the situation we're in. Obviously, there's some dialogue we need to have, but whether we want to continue with this project or not in this building, there's just one example. And just so that will probably consume most of our talks the next several meetings. But John, you want to just start here?
Sure thing. My handout, I'll start with that. I was asked to give a little bit more of a preface to this information that was disseminated earlier this year, specifically looking at 2007 to 2008 and what occurred you know, in Leelanau County, and the change in revenue from 13 million down to 11 million. Significantly, what we saw was a change in $1.6 million in collections from our tax revenue. Of that, only 453,000 of that 1.6 was delinquent, so meaning it came in the next year. The winter delinquent only accumulated about 6%. It was 97,000, and that would have been the 911 millage. Additionally, from 2007 to 2008, there was a rate drop in the 911 millage from 6 mils to 3.75. So that accounts for about 64% of the change. We have 606,000. That's kind of unaccounted for, you know, when I'm looking at it just as a quick review. But that's a 5.7% change from 2008 to 7 that I can't quite identify, you know, whether it be a series of adjustments or chargebacks or a number of different things as far as the tax records go.
John, economy wouldn't have played, because in no way the economy took a bomb, but that wouldn't affect these revenues, would it? So much?
It did a little bit, yeah.
Could
I
it
mean,
be 5% though?
it very well could have, yes. I mean, our average delinquent rate is 5%. So to say that, you know, an additional 5% on top of that because of the catastrophic, you know, bank failures and so on and so forth, I don't see that as being unreasonable. You know, and statistically, it's a small number. If you look down the other columns, everything stayed the same except for interest. And that's going to be a big thing for this year. You know, 2019, we brought in 172,000 for the general fund in interest. Well, my current rates are less than 0.5%. So I would be lucky to get, you know, a fifth of the revenue that we brought in last year.
Lucky to get what?
A fifth of that type of interest. But if you flip over, Lori Spencer helped me to look at the taxable values. And again, looking at 2007 to 2008, we actually saw an uptick in taxable value. So the valuation of the properties didn't adjust until 2010. Now you can see where it flattened for 3 years, and then in 2013 we started to see slight increases. So it isn't so much the value of properties changing as it is just cash flow and the ability to make payments, you know, on taxes and so on and so forth. And service-driven sectors of our business, if you will. And I say the delinquent tax revolving fund is an enterprise fund who bases a lot of its fees and interests and charges on each parcel. So if that increases, there's more revenue in that fund. The same thing with construction codes. The more permits that are out there, there's more revenue coming in. So when we see that shrinking, that economy shrinking in that regard, we're going to see enterprise funds kind of slow down. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context to a presentation that we gave, I think, in May, as to, you know, what happened. I have no projections as far as what 2020-21 is going to look like. And we're going to go from there.
John,
Yes, ma'am.
I know the real estate market is really hot right now, which surprised me at all levels. And I have a number of friends that are in that, mentioned that, and I was talking to one and I said, why? You know, with COVID hitting, everybody staying home. He said part of it, you know, are people who would rent are asking for his rentals, can they buy them and move here permanently? And others are just, maybe have had land for a long time and or just are looking for properties to buy and move up here. So he said the market is really going crazy, which came as a surprise, but in terms of taxes, that's probably a plus.
Well, and those two that have significant parts of their portfolio that were liquid and that aren't earning, to diversify, people are going back to land. You know, land is one of the greatest assets you can have in portfolio.
And interest rates are all-time low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of retirees that have, you know, portfolios that are diversified. You know, they're not going to pull out of their stocks. They're not going to pull out of their mutual funds because they're going to lose equity. But if they got CDs and money markets that aren't earning anything, yeah, it makes sense, you know, to invest in property that is going to appraise, you know, at 10%, 15% a year, I mean, which is a good return on your investment. You know, and Leelanau County has proven that for decades. So I see a lot of that. I mean, we have a few investors that are still holding on to property and they're reluctant to pull money out of investments to pay the taxes. And we'll see what this spring brings. We might have some significant foreclosure parcels as far as value. You know, but we'll deal with that as it comes. But any other questions on just the graphs?
Yeah, I was just looking at how it leveled off in 2010 through, you know, basically 2016, really. It's just started to go up a little bit as it goes there. And, I mean, in our economies always seem to go through these downturns, and I would say coronavirus is going to be another downturn. So it looks like our revenue will probably just level off as far as from property tax and that.
Correct. That's my feeling.
I mean, it would be interesting to see what happened after, you know, 9/11. You know, I would have a feeling it leveled off at that time too for several years. You know, but so that's maybe that's what we should really anticipate, that it's not going to increase, but it's not going to decrease. I mean, that.
And I can, you know, affirm what your position, but I can also add to it and say that, you know, during those last few downturns, you know, 9/11 and 2008 bubble, we didn't have the stimuluses that the federal government is issuing now. So those are crutching us along to keep GDP up and spending up, but that we don't see inflation and we don't see a recession and so on and so forth, you know, whichever way it turns. But yeah, I don't see us dipping. I just see us kind of flattening out for a while. And the largest discrepancy is just, you know, losing the 911 millage, you know, in that time period when the recession hit.
Right, well, we can discount that, I think, you know, from 2007 to 2008 as far as that goes. But I think that the stimulus that they're doing right now is going to create a tremendous amount of inflation. That's what I'm really afraid of. As you keep pouring money in that's, you know, not producing anything other than buying, it's going to, so I'm a little afraid of that. We'll see prices going up, but we won't see our revenue going up.
No.
And everything, you buy paper, you buy pens, or whatever we use here, it's going to continue to rise and our revenue stay the same. That's the thing I'm worried about. But.
No. Agreed. Any other questions?
Especially if they do this next 3 trillion or 1 trillion or whatever it's going to be.
I think it's projected at 1 trillion at this moment.
At least.
Yeah, that's minimum.
Minimum. So depending on how the Republicans and Democrats settle, it could be more, it could be less, but if anything, it'll probably be more. But nonetheless, If you'd like, we can kind of just poke at a few of the revenues on the revenue summary tab.
Oh, I did want to take a quick moment if I could. The design, Peachy, you got your book, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this beautiful design that's on the front, when you open your first flap of your binder, there's a little card here that states, the artist is Lynn Dervetsky's daughter. And so I thought it would be nice to spotlight her on the front of your cover. And so that's her business card there, but that's what, oh, well, I'll give you mine. Who's missing this? So I just wanted to spotlight that. And then, when you get to the revenue summaries, this book was produced yesterday, so John hasn't seen this number, and Chet was out of the office. So under your revenue summary tab that John's gonna talk about, the first line item is the fund balance forward. And this is every year, Michelle and I prepare this, we give you a balanced budget. So that first number, your fund balance forward, reflects the number that we're stating, in essence, is short of the expenditures in this fund, which is the 1.195987. So that's the number we're using to balance your budget.
How much detail do we want to go into today? You know, spending time on this, I'm wondering.
I was just thinking, in fairness to John and Jen, I don't know how much you want to go through this today, so I don't want to shortchange you, but I know you just got this. What we were hoping today is just have a general overview, give you the books.
Yep.
By next meeting, which is scheduled for August
13?
13th, I think, I have that very close, I think it's 13th. We will give you a memo outlining all of the unique requests that's in here.
Okay.
Commissioner West.
Yeah, and answer the question, I'd prefer just a brief overview of the revenue and then take the book home and study it.
That's what we were kind of assuming today, but we want to make sure you're all on the same page here before we go.
Yeah, let's go over the revenues quickly.
Okay.
Well, did you have anything you wanted to say?
No, I mean, just that, we typically prepare, and I talked to Chet, we typically prepare for you, what we call the list of, extras. There are no lists, there is nothing added in here unless it was discussed in the budget session last year. So one of those items when you do take home is under the jail. He had proposed last year a $30,000 project to do the cameras, and you had decided to split that over 2 years. So there's $15,000 in the jail's capital outlay that then rolls again because it's another $15,000 for that. Your narratives are at the back of the book with your numbered pages. You also have your staffing levels and your vehicle lists. Vehicles, they are status quo, meaning that they are asking for 4 additional cars, which has been the number that they've been doing consecutively. And then there's also the staffing levels at the back of the book, with the contracts being settled all but one at 2.5%. Chet did advise me to include a non-union raise at 2.5%, and that figure is plugged in your expenses, okay? So we'll have a list for you at the next meeting. I believe it's the 13th at 1 p.m. And we'll confirm that, but at that time, I will give you department by department what you'll see in the narratives that they're asking for and what that cost looks like on one to 2 pieces of paper.
I'm alarmed by the 2 million coming out of fund balance. Where does this leave our fund, what will that leave our fund balance?
1.2 million is coming out of fund balance. And it's,
Yep, so it's the last column, it's gonna say 1.195987.
Yep.
So that's your changes that we've made to accommodate the 2021 budget year. I can state that in 2019, the number isn't reflected here, but with our large purchases that we did with the HVAC system, you ran 618,000 or 681,000 of the fund balance that you had planned to use. So looking I would state that your expenses stay status quo. That typically when we plug this figure like we do, you generally are under this number, if not on a positive side. One of the things that John and I have not talked about is he has his revenues at 9.8 and the 285. So if you were to look at your sheet that he prepared for you, you'll see that your 2019 revenue was 10,000,001. So we've stated before that when we do this for you, we project to you almost at that number, which is 2 years prior, okay? So I can tell you, and John would be able to tell you, that if you took our taxable, which is on that second page, if you take that 3 trillion, billion, the number from the rate, and multiply that by our tax rate, just for 2020, you will have approximately, if everyone was to pay their taxes, 10.3 million. For 2020, we are showing you have 9.6. So that's a $900,000 swing. So basically, when we budget for you on your revenues, remember we are doing the least amount we feel we're going to take in.
The most conservative.
And on our expenses, it is either 100 or more, percent that you're looking at, so.
And Jen, at least the numbers I looked at for this year, as of, I think, July, we were under budget in our expenses overall.
Yes,
People have been very conservative. Plus, that includes money we have spent that we're gonna get reimbursed for also. So I'm very confident, and it's a good situation. John is always very conservative, which he should be.
Yep.
With our revenue. The worst thing would be is to overestimate revenue and have to make cuts. We have never been in that situation, thanks, I think, between John and Jen and Michelle. But also, it looks like this year, as most years, but I think especially this year, our expenses may be less than anticipated and a greater amount than in the past years. So we're optimistic. We definitely know we'll be in good shape this year. And
typically, like we had talked before I brought this book to you, in June when I brought to you that health insurance fund change. And I want it reflected in this budget because I want it reflected early rather than later in the year. So this number to me is reflected is a more firm number that you're looking at, not in the sense that you're gonna use 1.1, because like I said, we could have a $600,000 upswing and not spend 600,000 and you've got a net zero. So what I'm trying to realize is our actual cost if our revenues are low and our expenses are at maximum. And we may not need that whole health insurance fund, but that's what I wanted to implement this year just in case, so that we knew. And it helps enrolling into 2022 as well.
So to follow up, I mean, the taxable values that we have on record right now that are firm and submitted to the state are for current year only. So equalization and the assessors are gonna be working on 21's valuation for the next, 5 months. So I don't have those numbers, and I don't mean to guess on what those changes are gonna look like, especially with the current conditions of our economy and elections and so on and so forth. So what we do have is a 2020 taxable value, and we have a 2020 approved millage rate. That millage rate is also subject to rollback based on the change in valuation. I'm not going to assume what next year's rollback number is going to be. So I'm going to use this year's, which is a little bit, it'll be higher than next year's, but we're going to see an increase in taxable value. So I haven't changed the way I've done this since I've got here. This is the same format that I've used since 2013, and I don't intend to change because it has worked. It's very conservative. The 9.8, could easily be $10 million just for budgeting purposes, and we'd still be, I think, under what the revenues would come in at, because there's an increase in sales and properties. with increased sales and properties, there's uncappings. And with those uncappings, we have new taxable values. So there's new building, there's new constructions going on that are going to add to that, to jurisdictions' base values. There's so much subjectivity that goes into what that number should be, and I would rather look almost a little shy and be prepared. And yes, it's 1.1 million or 1.2 almost, but it's not necessarily out of line from previous years. The settlements and adjustments, I think 285 is very conservative. Normally, as I stated, our settlement at the year end, or in March from the townships, is about 5%. So 5% of our taxpayers are a year late. So I buy that and I distribute it out. So that means that the general fund isn't reimbursed for the 21 levy until 22 of March. So that number is a year behind when you're looking at it for budgeting purposes. Beyond that, I mean, the big items that we should be looking at, Chet brought up the revenue sharing. We have one more year in reserves that we get to draw from, so we're not going to be affected in 21 for the revenue sharing distribution. We have about $500,000 left. This year, I think we transferred 476. Is that about right, Jen?
Yes, 470, 949.
Okay. So we have enough to cover even an increase and not be affected by the state's budget deficit. So we won't be harmed there. Everything else throughout this revenue sheet, I want you guys just to take a look at. The Department of Interior, we can hope that, you know, the federal government's still going to give us park PILT, but there's a few of these that, you know, I'm just going to plug numbers in because we're hoping to get that money, but a lot of that stuff has not been determined, and the state has been slow in reimbursing us just on our day-to-day stuff. So I think that's the biggest thing I guess I wanted you guys to look at is, you know, the revenues I think are going to be consistent, and we're being conservative enough to, you know, absorb any fluctuation that may occur.
Is this the first year that we will participate in the revenue sharing? Because maybe I read something, maybe I'm using the wrong language, but what was it not? We were not receiving a certain amount of funds because we had paid so much, and that is revenue sharing.
Yes, and this is the last year, so the amount of money that's in there is all that's left for
There were
2021.
two counties, you were correct. Leelanau and I believe Emmett County were the
Emmett.
last two, correct?
Yep.
That the state still was paying.
So this will be the last year that we'll be taking our own money back.
Yep.
All right.
22 is when we'll have to start playing the game.
Okay. Now, do we know how much, what that dollar amount is? It seems to me I read somewhere it was around
This year was 470.
this year.
Yeah. But I think what happens is I'm not sure, and this is new to both of us, is that the money that's in there is ours, but we've collected interest. So I'm not sure if we're able to take the whole thing, or do we only take what the state tells us, which won't be until
Okay, so we
almost
don't
after,
know.
right.
Okay.
But we know there's at least 470 in there. So that's what we plugged, is the same number from 2020.
Annually, every June, or end of May, they publish what we can use. And that's when Jen comes before you for a transfer.
I knew I had read something about
Yep.
it, but I didn't read it in depth.
Well, I mean, it's a 5% of the budget, so I wanted to make sure that that was covered, you know.
Is that the reason that the interest will be down, because that will be out of those funds?
No, I mean, it's not, I mean, that $500,000
That's one of it,
is, yeah, I mean, that's its own separate fund, it's a reserve fund, so that can't be transferred into the general fund. It's just the general fund itself last year, at this time, was earning 1.2%. It's now down to 45 basis points, so that means 0.45%. So we've seen a significant drop. And I've had to increase our balances in the banks so that we're not getting charged fees because the cost of business is the same, but they're not earning their money to cover the cost. So they can't use the money that we have in the bank to lend or move or put in their own money market accounts, or their own funds. So they're working with us, and we're seeing some of it hit, but they're reversing it monthly. Like the road commission is going to have a hard time, so we just transferred the rest of their investment over, just so they don't see any bank fees. And it's just our daily transactions. And I said, are we doing any antiquated processes? And I've been assured that now we're up to date with all the processes that are the most cost effective. It's 20 cents a check that, to be processed. It's, $25 every time we wire money. Every time we get an ACH, it's 75 cents. It's just these processing fees that you guys don't see on a daily basis, but that we have to deal with, just to cover. And usually our balance in the bank is earning enough to offset that. But now it's inverted again. It was that way when I got here, and yep. It's not significant though. What is significant is we're not going to see a extra $175,000 in our general fund because of interest. It may be $30,000 because all of our CVs, all of our bonds have been called. Everything that was on a callable schedule, they immediately called because they're not going to pay 2%. They're not going to pay 1.5% when they can reissue those bonds at 10 to 30 basis points. So anyway. Yeah, and is there anything specific that you guys want presented for our next meeting on revenues besides what I presented this morning?
Can we email that request?
Mm-hmm.
Can we email our request yet?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Something comes up, or you see a revenue?
Would you email this? Because
Yes.
I can't, the colors obviously didn't come through, and it's hard for me to pick out which one's which. So if you wouldn't mind, it'd be easier for me to look at it online and figure out what's what.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Can do that.
So that brings us then to public comment. Whoa. Oh, okay.
I had a question on the budget rules.
We've got some other future dates.
Okay, and I wondered if it would be wise to amend those to include that freeze on, or commission review of all positions for the.
We can do that. That you have time on. You'll officially adopt the budget rules at the October meeting. So you have time, and I'm hoping by then we'll have a better idea of where we're at. You certainly have the right to extend that policy. The current policy expires December 31st, so you do have that right to.
Thank you.
Either change it and make those rules part of the budget process every year, or simply advance it for another 6 months or a year, or whatever you like. So we can have time to talk about that.
Thank you.
Speaking about rules, so we didn't make any changes. We didn't upgrade any of the dollar amounts that the department has to spend. Everything's the same as it has been. And it seems to be working fine. it's interesting, our amounts are actually some of the lowest, at least in North Michigan, in terms of what department heads and administrators can spend. But on the flip side, I don't see that being a real barrier, not having anyone complain, other than sometimes they want to spend things a little quicker than the board schedule allows it, but it seems to be working, so we're not asking for any modifications. Earlier, I found out those dollar amounts have been the same, I think, Michelle, since 1999, is that correct?
I know they've never changed since 2005, so.
So really, the amount that department heads can spend has not been adjusted in about 20-some years.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
only thing we ever changed, or that we've changed is, we used to capitalize anything that was more than $2,000. And with inflation, we changed that number to 5 because we were capitalizing everything because everything went up. So it's a $5,000 threshold for us to do that through our assets, so.
If these were normal times, we may want to look at raising those amounts, but I think under these circumstances, we should just keep them the same as they are.
On the flip side, that figure is twice as much as what I wanted to allow, so you gotta keep that in
It
mind.
just varies.
Thank you, Michelle. And Melinda.
All right, so then that brings us to future budget work session topics.
So we do have one scheduled for August 13th, to double check, it's 1 PM.
Okay,
One-
so hold on a second, because it's future budget work session topics we're on, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I have the first one is the list of requests not placed into the budget to the department requests. So we'll have that list for you
We'll
prepared.
have a special memo.
Yeah, and
Every
then
year next year.
budget rules are for future work sessions. Okay, is there anything else?
I think if we go over all the special requests and more detail about these budgets, then you can tell us who you want to schedule for future meetings. One topic we know you're gonna have a discussion on whether you want to proceed with the HVAC project here. That obviously is a major one, there's some cost implications there. But once you get that, and we'll try to get you that list, well, I won't say that, we will definitely get you that list in the near future, so you have some time to look at it before August 13th. And so we will get that to you hopefully next week. Elections coming up, so I know it's a busy time for Michelle and Jen, but we'll try to get that to you within a week. So that gives you at least a week to look at all the special requests prior to the 13th. So we'll try to get to you at least no later than a week from Friday. So you have at least a week to look at it and ask any questions. And then for future meetings, you can, as we have in the past, for those that you wish to, we've asked them to come in and give presentations. And at some point, we have to talk about the court's budget too. Commissioner Lauter wants to talk about that.
Yeah.
And I don't have a date yet, but there will be a meeting of the Judicial Commission here sometimes in the near future. I'm guessing by the proposed dates, maybe even prior to our second budget meeting on the 13th. I haven't seen the results. There was a Zoom, or there was a survey monkey sent out, meeting dates. So may have some issues, because obviously the court's budget has a major part in it. And Michelle's, or Jen, as far as I know, you and Michelle have not received any budget information from the courts.
No, I know that Carol Stocking reached out to us through the district court to get our numbers because we cost share her position. And she said that Grand Traverse County hasn't even mentioned going into budget.
There've been some discussions, and let's just say it has not gone well between the administrators and the courts in Grand Traverse County, because they're looking at some severe budget deficits. I think I put in my last Friday update, they're looking at about $350,000 deficit for this year. That's for this year, at least. So that would, we pay percentage, is it 18%?
For district court, we are 10%.
Okay,
That's our cost allocation, and then I think circuit it might be 11.
okay, I thought it was
Yeah.
18, but you could be right.
I think Antrim is more like the 18.
Okay, I don't want to, you're right, you're right.
Yes, Grand Traverse is like 73, 72, and then Antrim, depending on district court and circuit court caseloads.
Yeah, so it's not split 3 ways.
No, it's split the percentage of
But still,
caseloads
it
in
is
each
a
court.
significant, dollar amount. So we're still looking at those numbers, we have not received those numbers.
So are we going to set a couple of dates?
Yeah, so we have August 13th
Right?
already confirmed. We have that special workshop on septic systems on the 18th. so that day's already pretty busy. We'd like to schedule always 2 meetings in advance, so we have the August 13th. So it'd probably have to be, I'm guessing, after the 18th.
I was thinking of the following Thursday on the 20th, if Thursdays work for everybody.
Doesn't for me.
Not at all.
First thing in the morning, I gotta be out of here by 11:30.
So do I.
A lot of time. Special, okay, the last week of the,
Put Friday the 21st.
I'm good.
I'm good until 2.
AM or PM?
AM.
AM.
Yeah.
9 AM, sir. Okay, so August 21, 9 AM. Then August 13th is at 1 PM, which is ready. Good, yeah. All right, we'll go with those dates.
Jen, may I ask, did you send out the summary from the Raffaelli court
No.
decision?
No, you want to give an update?
Last month I came before you with the tax sale proceeds annual report. We had 100 and some thousand that was eligible to be transferred to the general fund due to the statute that allows after 2 years any excess proceeds that remain in Fund 517 to be transferred to the general fund for operational uses. We, as an association, lost a significant case, which is the Raffaelli case versus Oakland County. Just briefly, the Oakland County Treasurer foreclosed on a home for $8 and sold it for $80,000. That went to the Supreme Court and they ruled it as a taking. So we as an association are very concerned about the liability that we're going to see because there's a potential of a 6-year look back.
A 60-year
6-year look back
look back.
on properties that were sold at auction for excess gains. They haven't determined or defined what that is yet, but the statutes of limitations for this specific item is 6 years. Whether or not they're gonna do that, we don't know. But the 516 and 517, the way we operate is gonna change dramatically. And so my budgets are presented as if we're gonna be doing business as normal. The truth is I don't have a clue on what it's gonna look like. We have money in the foreclosure fund, but I don't know if it's gonna be enough if the courts order us to disseminate any sale proceeds. Go ahead.
Couple questions. One that was, if I'm not wrong, that was, the $8 ended up being some added interest that got added on the guy didn't know about. So it's a little bit different than excess sales. On the other hand, which I'm gonna agree with the Supreme Court, that was a terrible thing that happened to that gentleman. And I'm glad that we're gonna have a precedent set now. We haven't had anything as ridiculous as that in Leelanau County.
Nope.
You yourself said you weren't gonna allow that to happen.
Well, I'll take a step further, because John will say he has been diligently contacting
I know.
everybody and has met privately with people to make sure that does not happen. So
Right.
I can't see a situation ever developing here. I don't think whether it's John or any treasurer
Even if
would
it's
allow that to happen.
if
So
it's a
thank you
couple
for that.
$1,000s,
Yeah.
I make sure that I get a hold of next to kin, anybody I can, to make sure that, okay, you guys are walking paperless.
Yeah.
You know, and,
I really appreciate your stance on that.
well, yeah, and it's, I mean,
It's the
Like I
right
said.
thing to do.
It is.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. But the concern is You know, over the years, we've had some success at auctions. We've had, you know, $8,000 foreclosures sell for $80,000. You know, so there has been, you know, excess proceeds as defined by the Supreme Court that may be due back to the previous owner. So just a word of caution. I just want to let you know that Fund 516 and Fund 517 are going to change in the way they operate. And I would be very reluctant to say that, you know, we should use any of those funds for capital projects or whatever, because then I would have to lean on the general fund to make that whole and to fix that. I don't know MMRMA's stance on it yet. They represented us in the case. So we're hopeful that, you know, there'll be some cooperation, because they're basically, the court is saying is that the legislature created law that was faulty, and we've operated under that law for the past 11 years. Additionally, the courts went back to Magna Carta to determine what property is and what a taking is. So it was an interesting read. I mean, that the council went as far as going back to the Magna Carta and King John, when he signed that, and the definitions that are provided in there that carry over from our English language and our understanding of property and what taking is. And so that rule actually applied in the court's decision in this case. So good, better, and different. We're going to be changing the way we operate.
The bottom line is you're gonna be more conservative about letting any of those funds move until you have some level of comfort that
Not
they're not gonna
only
be.
Not only that, though, but there may be repercussions for entities that exercise their first right of refusal. They've been exempt in the past because they're using it for public purpose. Public purpose is a very wide scoped kind of bucket that everything gets thrown into, and it's kind of a gray area. But it could be that, you know, a local unit of government exercises the first right of refusal for a parking lot or for a recycling site or what have you, and they may be liable. So what complicates it is I may not be able to get rid of the properties, and then when I do, the county's not going to see a benefit from that. They're also talking about reducing the interest rates, which I'm in agreement with, because the last year, retroactively, it bumps 18%, which I think is outrageous. They're talking to bringing it down to 12% interest, so 1% per month is added. So there's going to be a lot of change on my side. It is going to affect, you know, how we as a body work. I mean, because we have leaned on the DTR quite a bit over the last, well, forever. I mean, we built this building from that. So I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I just want to give you guys a heads up that as things progress and more information is disseminated and we learn more, I will update you as soon as I can. But I just wanted to let you guys know that things are changing rapidly. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Then we go to number 4 item, the closed session. You have to have a motion to do that.
Yeah, I'm recommending we go into closed session and discuss the financial implications of our discussions with the labor contract, the unresolved labor contract.
How it will affect our budget.
I would move that we move into closed session.
Support.
Does that have to be a roll call?
Yes.
Commissioner Bonick,
Yes.
Commissioner Lautner,
Yes.
Commissioner Rettenbach,
Yes.
Commissioner Rushton,
Yes.
Commissioner Sotos Little,
Yes.
and Commissioner Wessel.
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
All right, we'll give you a call, Peachy,
Okay, thank you.
on your cell phone.
Okay.
Laura, you wanna move the cell phone here? I mean, not the cell, move the phone here.
The good news is, Jen, I squinted at that number, it's not as alarming as I
5
thought it
minutes?
was.
Okay, good, because you said something like 2 million, and I was like,
When you said, I know,
1.1.
it was, it looked like 1.9.
motion, yeah.
Support.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, the same sign. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. We're back into the regular session.
And just to clarify, I think you all know this is a workshop, there's no motions, but motion making are procedural motions in terms of the way you operate. So that's why you have to vote to go into closed session, vote to come out, even though it's not an official meeting, it's a procedural vote.
All right. Any questions about that?
We need a motion to adjourn?
We have public comment here, so I'll just read that. We have public comment. Please call 231-256-8109 if there's any public comment. 231-256-8109.
I just have a cramp, I'm sorry.
I thought you were eager to leave.
No, I saw you there.
Hey,
All right, hearing none, then we move on to commissioners' comments. Go ahead.
As part of the budget process, one of the things we need to do is look at all the expenses that we expect to incur. And based on the expenses from this year, would have an impact on what we could expense, or what we could expect next year. So in regards to the sheriff's budget, I want to make sure that we have an examination of additional funds for arbitration next year, based on this year's expenses. So if we have an estimate of how much we're going to spend on arbitration, we want to make sure that we incorporate that in the budget and make adjustments as necessary. And if we need to make adjustments in the sheriff's budget, his biggest expense is in manpower, so we may be needing to look at what we need to do with manpower in the sheriff's department in order to accommodate those expected expenses.
I don't think we have any contracts to settle next year, do we?
No,
That would not apply.
labor contracts you're talking about, right?
We can have arbitration expenses just as we did this year.
Agreement.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Very well then.
I get those over there.
That's too bad.
Thank you. No,
Is the oxygen getting in?
almost reasonable.
I
Almost, no, it's
do
pretty
it.
good.
Well, I don't drink out of water.